So meditation, we were just talking earlier, meditation is the exercise of mindfulness. We're going to be practicing deploying and directing our attention. We're going to be practicing intentionally disengaging from tension in the body. And we're going to be practicing creating some space, some breathing room between the observer, between you, and the contents of what arises in the mind. There are going to be images, memories, thoughts, phrases, words that arise in the mind. And instead of engaging and identifying with those thoughts, we're going to observe them and allow them to be as they are. From a Buddhist perspective, when you become aware of something, it automatically begins to change. When we are observed, our behavior changes. When we observe the thoughts that arise in our mind, the subconscious mind already begins to work on them. Because the awareness of that thought will initiate the process of actually getting it done. The awareness of that thought will begin the initiation, the unconscious, the subconscious initiation of the process. We'll begin by listening, even with our eyes open. So right now, notice the sounds happening in all directions around you. Is there a tendency to react? Yes, 2/3 of you reacted. So yes, there is. And the key is to begin to soften our experience in our body, to allow our energy to settle in such a way that we become aware of the impulse to react, the impulse to turn our head, the impulse to adjust or change something, but breathe instead of actually reacting. We've all had the different things in our partnerships, in our families. Families are like the ideal situation to navigate your triggers, right? Ram Dass says, if you think you're enlightened, go home for Thanksgiving. From an Eastern perspective, the thoughts that arise in our mind are to give you data to work with, just as the things that we smell. Sometimes we have suicidal thought patterns. Sometimes we have destructive thought patterns. Sometimes we have angry, judgmental, critical, harsh thoughts that arise in our mind. From an Eastern perspective, because there's only one of us here, because we're connected and part of a larger body, because we're in this together, there's something called the mirror principle. If you are having a harsh, judgmental, critical thought about another person in your mind, the same constellation of neural firing that occurs in your mind when you have that harsh, critical thought, that same constellation of firing triggers the exact same kind of thought about yourself. If you can cultivate loving, compassionate thoughts about another person, that increases the likelihood that you can have healthy, loving, compassionate thoughts about yourself. And now I know, again, this doesn't apply to any of you guys, but some people out there in the world have really harsh inner dialogues with themselves. We're in a world where we're shown so many things. We're shown the idealized perfect bodies, and we're told what it means to have a perfect body. We see things that aren't like us, and we're told that we're supposed to be like that. And what that can start to do is weigh on us. It can weigh on our hearts, it can weigh on our self-esteem, and we can start to feel like we're not good enough. We can start to feel like we need to do drastic things like cut our bodies open. Plastic surgery is one of the most perfect examples of doing something because of a material external perception. When we look at the statistics, we find that people who have had more than one plastic surgery, they're 90% more likely to have suicidal ideation. And so what we want to do is become so aware of the thoughts that arise in our mind that we don't allow our inner critic to cut us down, that we don't allow our own harsh negative thinking habits to prevent us from being kind and loving and generous, not only to ourselves, but to other people. In case someone hasn't told you this today, but it matters when you're in pain. It matters if you don't like yourself. It matters if you don't like yourself so much that it triggers unhealthy habits, like drinking too much, or eating things you shouldn't be eating, or saying harsh things and cutting off relationships, burning bridges. Psychological self-care is about realizing that your own mind and your own heart are super important, and they're your first responsibility. The extent at which we can forgive and accept and love ourselves is the extent to which we can forgive and accept and love other people. And that which irritates us about other people is something to look at inside of ourselves. If you feel like someone is superficial and judgmental, in what ways are you superficial and judgmental? If you feel like someone is harsh and critical, in what ways are you harsh and critical? So much of meditation is about disengaging from the delusional thinking patterns of our minds and opening ourselves up to a more compassionate, connected way of seeing things. The enlightened perspective is the perfectly clear perspective. The enlightened perspective is the perspective that recognizes and automatically sees that another person's experience, emotionally and physically, is equal to their own.